and welcome to another episode of Ready.Set.Midmarket, the podcast for all things mid-market IT from MES Computing. I'm Adam Dennison, Vice President of MES Midsize Enterprise Services with the Channel Company. Joining me is my co-host, Samara Lynn, Senior Editor with MES Computing. Welcome, Samara. And we're thrilled to have with us today Joseph Smolarski. He is the CEO of WatchGuard, and he'll be joining us for this episode, what IT leaders must do in the next 6 months to avoid falling behind in AI. Joe, welcome.
It's a pleasure, Adam and Samara. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. So before we get into the meat of the discussion and the topic, Joe, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? I know you're 8 months on the job at WatchGuard, so just kind of walk us through a little bit about the last 8 months, how that's been, and kind of give us a brief overview of WatchGuard, if you would.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And I'm probably a rare CIO and a CEO in the fact that I started as a CIO. That's a relatively rare trajectory for a CEO, but technical background, technical roots, and was formerly at a larger IT firm called Kaseya. November 1st, I took over as CEO of WatchGuard, and WatchGuard's been around for 30 years, very well known for the firewall. But over the last 10 years, we've become a complete cybersecurity platform provider, and one of the only ones, if not the only one, that is solely focused on the mid-market space. And pleasure to be here.
Love that you're focused on the mid-market space. That is our sole focus as well. Before we get started, I love the CIO to CEO trajectory there. I spent 13 years over at CIO Magazine. I was the publisher there. Back, we used to call it CIO plus one, and a lot of times it was facilities and a couple of other areas. We've seen a few work their way up to CEO roles, but you're right. That's the unicorn.
Absolutely.
So just briefly tell us how that came about.
Yeah, I think, listen, it certainly happened by accident in terms of the early days, and just there weren't even decisions I made, but just lucky choices. And I would say, just for some of the younger IT folks out there, one of the early decisions that was kind of made for me, just because I took my first job, I would have taken any job, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And it was, do you go on like the help desk and the network route, or do you go the applications route? I took my first job on the application side, and I think that's ultimately the path that got me into a multi-year journey of going into very senior ranks. Because like when you're on the application side, often you're dealing with very senior people in the organization as they're looking for their application needs. They want a new ERP system, a new CRM system. So I was sitting there talking to CFOs and COOs and things like that. And you get visibility that maybe you don't always get on the other side. The other side, maybe you're rising to CIO, CISO, or things like that. But it was a great journey, and I'm super fortunate.
So, there's a growing thought that second half of 2026 is going to be big for organizations with AI, and in particular within the mid-market. What's the theory behind that in terms of potentially being left behind? There's folks at various different levels in their organization and what they're doing, but what's the thought in terms of what's on the horizon 6 months from now and where folks need to be?
Yeah, listen, many of us older people have been through many different technological trends. And I think often a lot of these things start at the large enterprise and trickle down to mid-market and SMB. And you've got time. You've got time to kind of understand the trend, understand what's happening, and some time to adapt. And this one's different, Adam. It's just very different. It's the most disruptive innovation trail that's ever happened, quite frankly. And it gets clouded and muddied by the fact that there's a lot of bullshit out there as well. Like that, it's smoke and mirrors, and it's not really what they say it is. So you have to be scared because it is real, and it's happening at a pace where you hear people talking, like people smarter than me, like billionaire investors. You hear them talking differently than they ever have. They're not even talking about the AI of now. They're talking about the next model, and the next model, like it's definite. They know exactly where it's going, that this thing is going to be so disruptive. And that's why you see all the things that are happening. So it's not one of those trends where you could sit back, and I've been part of many companies where we actually say we don't want to be evangelical because it's very expensive to be evangelical, and you could be out of business by the time the trend hits or whatever. And this is a case where you have to be very progressive in the adopting of AI, because by the time you wake up, if you're slow, you may be out of business, and that's how disruptive it is. So it's a time that we all should be concerned, but also excited. if you take advantage of it the right way, it could help you leapfrog your competition. That maybe is a little bit more conservative.
Yeah, I've been in high tech media for 25 years now, and the only technology or trend I can put it toward that seems like a similarity was cloud, and it's very similar with the hype. Where would you say who's most at fault for this? Is it Samara and I on the media side? Is it the analysts of the world? Is it the vendors of the world? Is it the consultants of the world? Like where do you see most of the hype kind of coming from? Then all these CIOs and CISOs have to be like, what do I trust? What do I figure out?
Yeah, well, I think there should be hype, Adam. Like I said, I mean, it's the most disruptive technological innovation cycle ever. And that's hard to believe, So I mean, I think the hype's there for good reason. Listen, cloud was massive, and it definitely got adopted a lot faster than expected. So in the case of cloud, I was sitting in a very risk adverse industry, fintech, financial services, where many people thought there's no way the banks are going to adopt cloud because it's so far into a bank CISO and CIO and whatever, and even they did it, right? And they got there, a lot faster than expected. But cloud's still self-contained, right? Cloud's like where are your applications in your infrastructure versus when you look at what's occurring with AI, where you have to talk to every single department about what are your plans? Why are you not already there? How are you going to change, everything about your function? And that's something that, it just has never been the case. I mean, maybe back in the early 90s with the advent of the first like PC and things like that finally hitting corporate America, where it became a standard, et cetera. 80s, 90s, et cetera. So that obviously has some parallels, but it's very exciting, very disruptive, and certainly, on the cybersecurity front, it's absolutely scary what the bad guys are armed with at this stage. So you got to be prepared as a CISO, CIO on that front at a level that you never had to before.
So talk to me. I talk to a lot of mid-market. We call them IT leaders, right? They don't all necessarily have a CIO.
Of course.
But I talk to a lot of them in small groups. I do a lot of, MES lunches with a vendor partner of ours and, 6 to 8 or 10 IT leaders. And when we ask them where they're at with AI, typically what we hear back, and we partner with Gartner, is they use the term everyday AI, right? So Copilot, ChatGPT, Claude,
Sure.
and they think we're doing it, we're doing AI. From your side of the house, what's your response to that? Are they doing it? If they're, I've got an enterprise license with Copilot, I'm doing AI, but are you really building and getting returns off of it in that point? So if someone's response is that's where we're at now, where would you say they are? Use a football analogy. Are they receiving the kickoff? Are they at the 50-yard line? Are they in the red zone, or have they scored?
Yeah, I would say not to be dramatic, but in many industries, if that's where you're at, that's not AI. That's
Yeah.
like that's the AI of 9 months ago, and AI of 9 months ago is very different than what it is today. So I'm a massive football fan. Philadelphia Eagles, go Birds! But they I would say you're on the 5-yard line trying to avoid a safety,
Got it.
if that's the case, because at this stage you have to be looking at like true agentic and what agentic's doing for you, and what roles are being replaced, what roles are being augmented. Why do you have level 1 functions in many of your areas when those level 1 should have been leveled up to level 2 at this stage with all the tooling that's out there, and you should have tons of automation handling level 1, things like that you just have to, because otherwise you won't be able to compete, at any level if that's the case.
Got it. I'm a Steelers guy. I grew up in Erie, Pennsylvania.
Hey,
So
that's
my
awesome.
Jet. Samara, I'm guessing Jets.
I'm not going to mention the Jets.
Hey, as long as it's not the Giants, as long as it's not the Giants.
So where do you see AI progress being made in production right now with some of your customers, or even WatchGuard itself?
Sure. Yeah. That's the good news. While there's a lot of smoke and mirrors in certain areas, there's huge progress. And I think listen, near and dear to my heart is cybersecurity operations, right? So I think if you look at, when you had a level 1 dealing with incidents previously, call it 18 months ago, they're a level 1, they're 6 months into the job, they're barely able to spell cybersecurity, and something hits their desk, and their response back to a customer or whatever, it's not in depth, it's not great, et cetera. And in today's day and age, you can have somebody who's 6 months out of school given a very thorough analysis back because they're armed with all of these tools So even when customers are not using, the self-serve tools that are out there with AI and things like that, it's the personnel on this side all of a sudden sound like an L2, L3 because they're instantaneously armed with all kinds of remediation and investigation information that they never had previously to get to root cause very quickly and help with remediation steps. So that's a clear path. Support. I think just general customer support in any function has been transformed. That's not smoke and mirrors. Sometimes sometimes in our B2C lives when we're calling into customer service, we'll get frustrated because you'll get stuck in an AI loop and it feels horrible and you get pissed and you're saying, talk to a human, talk to a human, talk to a human.
Right.
But the reality is massive progress has been made. And I've seen it throughout many companies where, you're used to solving, call it 40% of your issues on day number one. And that's just doubling at this stage because they're either the customer self-serving via the great tools that are out there, or if it hits your desk, you just got so many great tools to solve those issues faster, which leads to a great customer experience. And you can do two things. You can optimize your labor, or second, you can start kicking butt and selling more and growing, which is a fantastic thing for investors and everything else, and just not have to add as much headcount at that stage, which is a great story as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got plenty more questions on my side, but Samara, I want to bring you into the game here and some questions that you might have.
Yeah, well, Joe, I mean, this is like a really great topic. And I think having been in IT, one of the things, the big challenges I see with AI are just, they're like, it's like multidimensional because you have this challenge to, transform, streamline operations, but then you also have AI introducing these new machine identities. So now you have a cybersecurity issue. And then you have AI ramping up the threat landscape. How are you seeing your customers contend with all of these at once and launching successful projects?
Yeah, it is. That's the scary part of the 2026 AI, Samara, is that the bad guys, they have such a wide attack surface at this stage. And if they could just take control of one of those non-human identities or, get in one way or the other, there's so many cloud profiles and applications and SaaS, and it's just all over the place at this stage. So the best way to fight back is with an agentic enabled platform, right? Because I think in the mid-market, you don't have the luxury the way a Citigroup or a Deutsche Bank or some massive company has to have people dedicated to every single seat, every single function, whatever. You're just overwhelmed. You're a bunch of jack of all trades working your buns off to try to keep up with everything that's out there. And you can't do that with a bunch of point solutions that just don't talk to each other well enough. So I think, whatever you choose, having an agentic platform that understands the correlation that's occurring between to cut out the noise, right? Because if you're getting all of the alerts from all the different systems, you don't have enough people. It's just too inefficient, et cetera. So I think that's one of the key strategies. And for us, as we said, we try to focus in on the persona of the mid-market person and the mid-market IT professional, because if you focus on the enterprise, you tend to focus in on that one person who only does one thing versus what I grew up with when I was a CIO in mid-market is there no luxury of having just one job. You're doing 10 different things and you're getting pulled all over the place. And you need the tools that are kind of built for your profile. So that's what we're seeing at this point.
So keeping things in the security space, I'm a mid-market IT leader. I wake up after the 4th of July and I feel like I'm a little bit behind here. What's your suggestion on them on a couple of areas to focus, before New Year's hits on December 31st to help at least start to get them up to speed where they're at? Because as you just said, they can't do everything. They might not have the resources, they might have the budget, maybe it wasn't planned. But what are a couple of areas that they could focus on from a AI perspective in that cybersecurity world to get them on the right track relatively quickly?
Yeah, I would say, obviously pick the right horse. Yeah, you want to make sure that you're betting on the right company. There's so many companies coming out of the woodwork at this stage, and the last thing you want to do as a CIO or a mid-level IT professional is bet on somebody who's been around for 3 years and might not be here a couple years from now because it just the way the world works and whatever. So bet on the right horse. And certainly if you don't have a SOC, you need to invest in a SOC because you can't get away without anything other than 24/7, 365 people looking after your environment. The bad guys move way too quickly, and we see that every day. The pace, the complexity, and the fury of how they're coming at everyone is something that just can't be matched, and you can't do that on your own. So you need to pick, somebody from a SOC perspective, and they have to have AI, because even the big vendors like WatchGuard and like others, you can't fight it with human beings, because you will go out of business. There's just not enough human beings to go around. So you need AI to fight AI, and go from there. But that's where I'd start is, there's a lot of great companies that will partner with the IT folks and do some of the legwork for them, and provide lots of free services to just help them sleep easy at night, knowing what they got to get in place very quickly in the second half of 26.
Got it. Let's bring the data side of it in, and that's always a concern. Is my data, is it ready? Is it clean enough? And again, just going back to Gartner, because we partner with them at all of our MES events. We share state of the mid-market research together, and Mike Sizik, the lead analyst there in the mid-market, one of the things he says is it's never going to be perfect, but you've got to start somewhere. So again, thinking about it either holistically or from a cybersecurity lens, what's some advice or areas that you've seen folks fall down on their data quality and cleanliness, and what should they be doing in that regard to get themselves prepared?
Yeah, well, I think a couple things. You're certainly right on the data front. So I think the power of AI is all about what data do you have, and how do you unleash that data, and what do you do with it, et cetera. And the caution, I would say, when you're looking at data, it could feel like you're trying to shoot for world peace. It could feel like an impossible task. So you got to look at it with real world scenarios and what you're trying to accomplish. I actually had some product folks that worked in a previous organization come to me and talk about building this amazing data warehouse and whatever. And as I drilled in, it's like, well, what problem are you solving? And it's like, well, we're going to solve all problems. We're going to have data for everything. And I'm like, no, I'm not funding that, because you'll never get there. Like, you got to know, like, all right, I'm going to narrow in on this use case. And, even when you have very unclean data, and I worked for a lot of companies that are in, acquisition mode. And when you're in a crazy acquisition mode, often things just get out of control, right? Because you have people focus on top line growth, don't really care about us IT professionals, and they just keep layering on more and more and more, and it gets out of control. So, but in those situations, don't get overwhelmed. So if it's cybersecurity and that's what you're going after, look at the 5 business outcomes that you're trying to get to, and then just focus there versus trying to think you need to build some master data warehouse to solve world peace, because it'll never happen and you'll waste millions of dollars.
Yeah. So I have a couple more questions left, but Samara, I want to see any additional questions that you have for Joe before we wrap.
Joe, you're clearly very passionate about the cybersecurity and AI. Absolutely clear. In your mind, it's always curious. And we always talk about AI ready data. What does that mean? What does that even mean? Does that mean structured, filtered?
Yeah, listen, you'd be surprised. Even larger companies, right? Companies that are valued at $1 billion or greater. So sometimes, like, their data is so poor for various reasons, lots of excuses, lots of old fashioned people who just never looked after their house. And I've known some of those companies. I won't name them, but if you can't run your business, like I would forget about AI ready, but like if you're struggling to run your business because you can't get to the right answers, if you're a software company and you don't know your renewal rates because things have just gotten out of control and out of whack and whatever, then like AI is not going to be able to help you with that, right? For the most part.
Right.
Like you've let it get so far out of whack. So, but if you're your typical company where, like, you can run your business, you can make smart decisions, and you've got the data you need, then, typically you're the first stage of AI ready, and maybe you got to do a lot more work to make it more mature, et cetera. But don't be overwhelmed. I truly believe, like, one of the best ways to make progress is to just take it in bite-sized chunks, because it's so overwhelming sometimes to look at the big, broad problems and you don't know where to get started, and it's often a futile effort. So it's attainable, but if you have enough data to run your business effectively today, then AI can just augment it from there. And if you're feeling like you're lost and clueless, that's a bigger problem, and you got to solve that first.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, what are one or two of the the bigger hype things you've heard out there, whether it's, other vendors or again, media or analysts or consultants, and, the BS red flag goes up and you're like, that's not accurate. You're positioning this completely wrong. What are some of the things that you hear out there that an IT leader should kind of take pause and this might not be what I'm looking for?
Yeah, Adam, you really do need to be careful. And again, this is like a serious case, and I will not name the company, but I wrote a $500,000 check, so not the biggest check in the world, but I wrote a $500,000 check with a public company valued at 30 billion plus, who I just trusted them, and their AI solution didn't work, and I had to watch every single day when their CEO was online telling the world how great it is. And I personally spoke with him and he told me it didn't work for us. And I wasted $500,000, which they try to make up in other ways or whatever. So like, you just have to do your validation. Like, be careful
Sure.
with a quick signature on the dotted line because you saw some PowerPoint or some demo. If you're making a big decision that's going to affect your health, your job, et cetera, then just do the validation. There are areas right now that are more mature. We've talked about some of them. Cybersecurity analysts, ripe for automation. Customer support, ripe for automation. So you have a lot of those areas.
Absolutely.
If you're getting into something more exploratory, just make sure you're doing your validation so that you don't burn a lot of cycles and put your job in jeopardy because you made the wrong bet.
Yeah. Bad investment upon bad investment upon bad investment is not a great
Exactly.
recipe for a mid-market IT leader.
100%.
So talk to us a little bit as we close here. Again, we've worked with WatchGuard in the past. We love to have you back in the mix with MES. What is your approach when it comes to mid-market? Are you pretty much a channel first organization, a direct organization? Is it a blend? What does that look like in terms of how you address the mid-market?
Sure. Yeah. So again, we're the rare company who we believe that we could be highly successful and not have to go up market to the enterprise, et cetera. That doesn't mean that some very important people don't use WatchGuard, right? We have 3-letter agencies that protect the United States that are using WatchGuard as their cybersecurity solutions. We have fighter jets with WatchGuard fighting for peace around the world, all that good stuff. But our solutions are only built for the mid-market. That makes a big, big difference, team, in the fact that you don't have the enterprise complexity where it's built for that and they try to retrofit it to sell into the mid-market. It's just not the same. So you'll see that with our solutions. Yes, we do only sell through the channel because that's also our commitment to the world. But most mid-markets are dealing with some form of channel across the board as well. So we're going to maintain that commitment to the channel and never have any conflict. And we're proud of that as well, Adam.
That's great, and that's obviously what we like to hear at the channel company. So that's
Absolutely.
that's outstanding. So we're getting toward the close here. Is there any final questions from you, Samara, or anything we missed, Joe, that you want to make sure that you get across to our audience?
Samara?
Yeah, no, nothing for me. This is a really engaging, very insightful information, Joe.
Yeah, Samara and Adam, it was really, really a pleasure to meet you, and I look forward to staying in touch. From my side, we are a unique company, as I mentioned, that's dedicated to the mid-market. And I think that makes a massive difference for a mid-market IT leader and the channel itself, that you don't need to worry about, competition and those kinds of things. We're here for you. We're not an aggressive company. We're here when you need us. So we'd love to continue to expand. We had a record-breaking year, and 2026 is set to be another one. So really appreciate the time and looking forward to continuing our conversations.
Outstanding. You got a great name of the company too. It just feels like I can trust that organization. They got my back.
30 years.
No, thank you thank you so much. So for those IT leaders out there, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Our next MES event is going to be MES Fall in mid-September. We're down in beautiful Marco Island, Florida. So if you're not already registered there, please get your applications in, and we would love to see you down there. So in closing, I'd like to say have a wonderful 4th of July weekend, and go Pittsburgh Steelers, everybody.
Hey, go Birds. Take care.
Thank you so much.